fast would I sink? How far and how fast would I sink in your estimation if I told you that I wish today I could simply say to you, give me a call if you've got something interesting to say about the budget. I know that sounds a little lazy, but if you gave me a long run-up and a top PR operation, I could probably portray it as being the opposite of lazy. I would just love to know. I read the coverage, I listen and watch the coverage, as you probably do, although I fully understand if you don't, because you don't feel that these changes make much measurable difference to your life. I suspect this year is different for a lot of us, for millions and millions of people. This budget probably held more promise or importance than previous ones, simply because we are in such uncharted waters. Therefore, the individual charged with plotting our course through the uncharted waters, I think, necessarily becomes a lot more important and a lot more interesting. You know, this is not a year, for example. Yes, I'm right about this, actually. I worried that I wasn't before we came on air, but think about what usually happens. You could have a chancellor deliver a budget speech and the media obsesses about a tax on Cornish pasties. Usually, and I haven't seen this anywhere yet. Has anyone seen this? How much a pint of beer is going to cost? Unsurprisingly, given that you can't currently buy a pint of beer in a pub, what with all the pubs being shut and that. But do you see what I mean about the media searches for, and me included, this isn't one of those days where I cast myself as swimming against a tide of right-wing bile produced by various client journalists. I think it's absent this year because it is a budget that matters a lot more to ordinary people than in previous years. So, you know, if you don't float around the top tax rate, then changes to the top tax rate don't affect you that much. If you're not really going to see your income or your livelihood substantively altered by budget policies, by announcements made in a budget, then you're going to be more interested in what it's done to the price of a pint. And, of course, back in the day, the price of a packet of fags used to be big news as well. It was George Osborne, of course, that delivered a budget which ended up being interesting chiefly for the reverse ferret on pasty taxes. And, of course, there's also the problem that almost all of it, as Lindsay Hoyle alluded to yesterday, in quite a characteristically sweet aside, most of it was already leaked to the media anyway. And then you've got the problem of not having a degree in economics, or even if you've got a degree in economics, not having a full grasp or indeed interest in all elements of it. And I suppose this is just me writing a big long letter to you saying that it is perfectly possible today that you'll have a lot more interesting insights into the budget than I currently have. 6 minutes after 10 is the time. I'll get the phone lines open and I'll keep that sort of bubbling on the back of the stove, if I may. Give me, and it's not an experiment in avant-garde radio presenting. It's a genuine inquiry, but one which I fear may be too broad and vague to produce the goods that we all come for at 10 o'clock every weekday morning. All right, so give me a ring on 0345 6060 973 if you think you've got something interesting to say about yesterday's budget. That is a genuine challenge. It's a starter at 10, but it is not, I don't imagine, going to provide me with enough raw material for the rest of this hour. So do please try something interesting to say about the budget. Ring me now on 0345 6060 973. Because the bit I focused on, so there are sort of three types of people in the world, aren't there, politically? People whose politics hinges upon making their own lives better. People whose politics hinges upon making other people's lives better, and then you break that second category down into two to get your third. People whose politics hinges upon making their social superiors' lives better, whether they realise it or not, and people whose politics hinges upon making their people less fortunate than themselves have better lives. So the James O'Brien's Guide to Politics in 3 easy lessons. People who vote for their own interests, people who vote for the interests of the less fortunate than themselves, and people who vote for the interests of the more fortunate than themselves, although obviously people in the third category usually think they're in the first category. That's why people spend millions and millions of pounds running newspapers. So if we were to focus on the sort of specific category of people thrown up by the coronavirus, that i.e. people who would ordinarily fit into one of those three categories, but now coronavirus has just made their business the only thing they care about. I'm close to you, I have to say. I worry as just as a member of the public, as a punter, as a customer, as a client, as a patron. I worry about what is going to emerge at the end of this incredibly dark and twisting road. I don't know what is going to happen to your company. I have friends in business. Some of them have done very well. Some of them have barely done anything since March of last year. Some of them have been quite well looked after by the government. Some of them have been, in their own words, completely abandoned by the government. The friends I have, and I think this is a bit of a broad generalisation, but I think it holds true. I heard someone on a different radio station today describing entrepreneurs or business people as incredibly brave and courageous, which I don't get all dewy-eyed and sentimental about that. But I think if I look at my own world, then people who set up their own businesses are made of slightly different stuff from the rest of us. And by businesses, I mean something where you've got to go out into the public space and try to sell your wares, whether you're flogging PR services or whether you're flogging pineapples. You go out into the world at large and you try to sell your wares on your own behalf. And I think as I get older, and I get a little bit more... I don't want to say less idealistic, because that's a bit holier than thou. But as I get older, I get a little more realistic, there you go, about money and finance and business. I have more and more respect for. I still think you should pay proper taxes and all that kind of thing. But and I don't believe in trickle-down economics in the way that it's presented as to us by the usual ghouls and vampires shilling for anonymous donors. But I do think we should look after our business people for what I hope are slightly obvious reasons. Now, that is why I remain deeply confused by Rishi Sunak's failure to look after some 2 or 3 million business people, to essentially exclude them from the furlough schemes and the various support schemes that were put in place to protect business and to protect workers. There might be a rationale for it, or the historians of the future might simply conclude that it was a crack he didn't notice, and by the time everyone had slipped through it, it was too late to close it. So yesterday was probably, for many people, it was probably D-Day, wasn't it? Judgment Day. It was the day you would find out what the next 12 months was going to mean. With the variable and the unknown element of coronavirus, you turned to the Chancellor yesterday hoping to hear either, and these are the people I'm most interested in hearing from today, but obviously in the interest of inclusivity and originality, I leave that question hanging. Give me a ring if you've got anything interesting to say about the budget. But the people I'm most interested in are the people who have spent a year battling with the reality of being completely ignored by the Chancellor. Did he help you yesterday? I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I will tell you that I hope the answer is yes, because I care about you. So do most people, even if they don't always realise it. 0345 6060 973. If you've had the mother of all nightmare years, did Rishi Sunak come to the rescue in even a small way yesterday? Okay, 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And the second element of this that I'd like you to talk to me about, I see that sort of Times reports lifelines extended for freelancers and furloughed workers, but that's essentially an extension of support for people who already had it. So if you are in the category of having had no support, was yesterday the final nail in the coffin of your company? And obviously I hope not. The second area that intrigues me, and again, I'm staying with businesses, but of course, look, you could be a window cleaner with no employees. You're what I mean by a businessman, just as much as if you've got a chain of pizza restaurants and you've got 250 employees. I just want to know whether or not this rising corporation tax coupled with some very generous tax incentives for, quotes, investment in infrastructure, end quotes, is going to change anything for you. So I'm looking for change. The way you look at the world, the future you envision for your company has changed as a result of the budget. Is the broad umbrella under which anyone can contribute today. 03456060973. But what I want most is... Well, I can't say good news, can I? Because that turns us into sort of North Korean state radio broadcasters. But I would really like, and I know some people get cross with me when I try and see the good in politicians who don't wear the scarf that they wear. But I can't help it. It's just, you know, the way I am. And Rishi Sunak sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Right up until the point he starts coming out with the guff about levelling up and hiring more policemen and nurses, and all these Conservatives who voted to cut jobs are now are begging for your support because they're now going to put people back in jobs that they abolished in the first. So I don't buy all that bit. That's where the political rhetoric comes in. But I guess what I'm saying is that when I hear the Chancellor talking, he sounds to me, and he sounded to me at the beginning of the furlough scheme, like someone who has crunched the numbers and understands what he's doing and knows what he's talking about. The only way I can confirm or deny that suspicion is by asking you whether or not he's helped you. Has he helped you and your business? I don't want a switchboard full of people saying no. All right? I don't know that there's much I can do about that, and if there is just an unleavened an overwhelming tidal wave of people saying no, he hasn't, then I need to know why you were expecting his help and what sort of help you were hoping to get. Okay? Hopefully that's it from me this hour. 0345 6060 973. Has Rishi Sunak saved your bacon? The sort of slightly cheeky request is for you to give me a call and tell me something interesting about the budget. The rather more serious and certainly more specific request is that you simply tell me whether or not Rishi Sunak has, to use a fairly clear and popular figure of speech, has Rishi Sunak saved your bacon, your business bacon, okay? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And obviously this is with particular relevance, or for me at least, with particular interest in people excluded and forgotten, to use the phrases of the organisations that they've set up, by previous attempts to protect business. Richard is in Banbury. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, I'm a small business owner. I run a social media agency in Banbury. Okay. We've had 5 employees at the start of this COVID pandemic. I've now got 1 left for various reasons. But not to run through a couple of the reasons, would you? Unless it's not remotely relevant. But I'm interested in what you've been through and what your workforce has been through. Yeah. So at the start of the pandemic, it happened very quickly. Within about a space of 2 weeks, I'd lost 1/3 of my clients in the events industry. Oh, gosh. So we were managing the social media accounts for clients like the Ricoh Arena and all sorts of different places, rugby teams, and all of that ended. Because there's no events, so they don't need any support. So they either suspended or decided to take their work in-house. I then was in sort of panic mode, looking at the C-bills options, which, credit to my bank, it didn't take them actually too long compared to a lot of people to get that sorted out. When the furlough scheme came in, I decided to furlough everybody for a month. Yes. And I worked through everything that was left, and I gradually brought employees back off of the furlough scheme. So starting with 1 in 1 month and then a second in the second month. I then kept 2 on furlough up until the point where it was announced that they were winding up the furlough scheme. Right. At which point I was advised to look at redundancies. Yeah. And then with 6 hours to spare, Rishi Sunak extended the furlough scheme. Exactly. It was too late for your 2 employees, was it? Yeah, exactly. A lot of people in that boat. And although we're looking for positivity today, in part, that is something we're going to have to look at in the future, isn't it? The number of people that were essentially put out of work by Rishi Sunak prevaricating over the extension of the furlough last October, I think. I agree, but on balance, I do believe that he saved my business in the sense that I have had a C-bills loan, which has then been converted into what's called a bounce-back loan. Yes. I have managed to, one of my members of staff has actually handed in her notice, so that's not to do with coronavirus. She's just managed to find a different employment somewhere else. Sure. So, but it has kept me going, and it has given me hope. And I think the budget yesterday was really interesting, especially to do with things like apprenticeships and the ability for further lending for companies as well, and an extension of the furlough scheme in some way. So I think...
So you're broadly warm about Rishi Sunak's performance so far. I'm not hearing specific to yesterday, apart from the apprenticeships line, and that's really helpful because it's probably that my age that you say apprenticeship, and I think of someone on a production line in a car plant. But of course, you can have an apprenticeship in a digital social media PR agency. Of course, you can. I think people like me need to remember this.
I've had 12.
There you go. You see.
Yeah. So where I think company directors have been left out a little bit is those that haven't converted to PAYE. I can furlough myself because I'm on PAYE, and I made that decision very early on in the pandemic to change from paying myself through dividends and a director's wage, which means you pay a very limited amount of national insurance, like the very minimum.
Yes.
You top it up with dividends. These are the people that are suffering because they've never been on PAYE and they've suddenly stopped making profits, and thus they can't pay themselves the dividends.
So how come you could switch horses?
Because I did. You can switch at any point. So you can just literally convert your pay into PAYE. You end up paying a bit more tax if you've paid some dividends out or whatever that haven't been, taxed in the same way.
But everyone I'm being thick. Everyone who tells me they don't qualify for furlough because they
because they're not on PAYE.
Yes, no, I get that. But you're not saying they could easily have fixed that overnight and then suddenly...
They could have done. Yeah, they could have spoken to their accountants, converted themselves over to PAYE.
But it's based on X years worth of accounts, though. Whether you get a furlough,
I'm not 100% sure.
I'm going to pause you there. I think you might be wrong, and otherwise you're telling 3 million people that they should have just taken better accountants.
My accountants advised me that I've been on PAYE for long enough now to furlough myself this time round.
Okay.
I wasn't able to furlough myself straight away, but I was able to furlough myself this time round.
I hope so, obviously, although it's going to be a bitter pill for people who may have been able to avail themselves of that and didn't for whatever reason, certainly. I love the apprenticeship idea. There's probably a fly in the ointment that someone will point out, but there you go. Richard in Banbury, first up this morning. Yeah, he has kept my business afloat. And, of course, when you go back to last March, I said yesterday, and I increasingly mean this, what else could he have done? I was as guilty as the next man of giving him a bit of a cheer when he brought in the furlough, because it was so at odds with that ideology at the heart of the sort of Tufton Street Vote Leave government. The idea that you do actually look after people and government has a role to play in people's lives, which is something that anybody who's not mega rich should recognise, but of course doesn't for all the usual reasons. But what else could he have done? He could not have last March said, all right, you're all on your own, sink or swim. You're not allowed to go to work, but if you're not getting paid, stick everyone on universal credit. He could not have done much different from what he did, I don't think, but that's not a criticism. It's simply a statement. Colin is in Bexhill-on-Sea. Colin, did he come through for you yesterday?
Good morning, James. He really did. I was very impressed with the budget. I was a bit worried he might not have. I'm in retail,
right?
I have a small boutique.
Yes,
and but without him, the business probably would have failed. But we've had probably £15,000 in grants, and on top of that, a good bounce back loan. With the last call, I just want to steer you to the contents of yesterday's budget, if I may, because I'm perfectly happy to hear praise for what he did last March and subsequently, but I'm not ignorant of that. I'm keen to know how yesterday's announcements improved your outlook. Well, he's offered us another grant of, I think it's about £4,000. Taking us through to the end of March. And then there was mention of a new bounce-back loan scheme of up to £25,000 for a business my size. And with that kind of money available to a business like myself, it puts us in a really good position going forward and hopefully opening in the summer.
And that's the point, isn't it? Is that he's banking... It's a budget as a bridge, whereas a budget is usually a destination. So this is designed to get people like you and my last caller to the point where you can reopen
Yes, and there was great concern that he wouldn't have continued with the grants and continuing to support the loans, which would have been fatal because nobody's opening yet, if you know what I mean. So all of the grants.
That's a tough one as well.
It would have been a waste of money.
That's what I mean. If he didn't extend it until normality is resumed in some meaningful, measurable way,
then it is all a waste.
Then all of the money that he'd used propping up businesses like yours would have been wasted. I had never thought. Forgive me for being so dozy. I'd never thought of that. So in a way, I mean, the problem there, Colin, is that if you flip the telescope round and look at it through the other end, if businesses like yours don't survive, and I obviously fervently hope that they do, then there becomes quite a strong argument for yesterday's announcements throwing good money after bad. But of course we won't know whether or not the support offered so far has turned into bad money until we work out how many businesses that receive support don't come out of the...
Well, a lot of businesses that are receiving these large amounts of support were nowhere near generating that amount of income prior to COVID, which is a worry. Other businesses, the money they're receiving is nowhere near the amount they were bringing in. It's only divided into 3 tier levels. However, it's a blind investment by the government, and hopefully...
And that's it. And you'd have to be... I mean, this is part of the problem the Labour Party has at the moment, because you'd have to be really wrong and nasty and various other insulting words to not want it to work, to not want people like Colin and my other callers to come out of this in fairly good shape, in goodish, to come out of this nightmare with a fighting chance. That's what he's delivered. But, of course, the longer it's gone on, and who last March thought we'd still be in it this March? Go on, hands up. Yeah, exactly. So to keep supporting these businesses as it extends beyond anybody's expectations is actually quite a double-edged sword. It's a risk, but it's a retrospective risk management exercise as well, because to not extend the support to the point where the businesses can reopen properly would probably have rendered all the money offered to keep these businesses solvent while they couldn't open and trade. It would have rendered that money lost, wasted. Spaffed, I think, is a word popular in Downing Street, although I'm not sure you'll ever hear me say it again. 29 minutes after 10 is the time. How was it for you, as we touched on yesterday with reference to the great Manchester band James? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's looking good so far, and I had a feeling it might. You are more than welcome to come and rain on our parade, but do so politely, where the question is, I hope, a helpful one and an illuminating one. There are days when the temptation to step out of the political circus is irresistible, and I appreciate not everyone's going to agree with me or indeed like my decision to do so, but today I do want to step outside of the political circus and ask you whether or not the Chancellor of the Exchequer yesterday sort of confirmed that you will come out of the coronavirus lockdowns with a fighting chance of your business survive. Did he improve your fortunes? 0345 6060 973. And if you're unhappy at the bias here, I am desperately hoping to hear more positive stories than negative ones. Then where the hell have you been for the last year, and who the heck do you think is going to be responsible for getting the tills ringing when we're finally allowed back into shops and pubs on a grand scale? Michael's in Southampton. Michael, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call. I haven't been laughing at the circus recently, but yesterday I did get a smile because I run an apprenticeship provider.
Oh, yes. So, blimey, jackpot.
Yesterday was massive for us. We also deliver traineeships, so there was a big announcement about that yesterday. And what that really means for my business is growing staff, getting back on track where we were before the pandemic. And, I've had sleepless nights over the last year of making sure, I take it very personally with the people I employ. Yes. Their mortgages are on my shoulders. So yesterday really was cause for optimism and positivity.
Was there enough detail? I heard someone reminding us that Boris Johnson stood on the steps of 10 Downing Street and said he already had a plan to deal with social care. And then when Rishi Sunak was asked about social care today, he said, it's all very complicated and we're hoping for cross-party support. So is there detail behind the headline for you?
Yeah, there is. I mean, we know that the cash incentives are going to help businesses left, right and centre. I mean, there still is work to be done. I mean, can you tell me what a traineeship is?
Can I tell you what a traineeship is as opposed to an apprenticeship?
Correct, yeah.
No. But you can tell me, and now you're going to.
I am. A traineeship essentially is a pre-apprenticeship. So it's where a young person, 16 to 24, who's unemployed, can go into a business and do a work placement, and the employer will get paid £1,000 for that work placement. And then if the employer puts them onto an apprenticeship afterwards, they'll get another £3,000 cash incentive. So it's all to play for.
Oh, no, I did know. I do myself a disservice. It's my natural modesty. Once again, hijacking my broadcasting style. I did know about that. Remind me what the trainee gets.
The trainee gets support with, first of all, their maths and English, so they haven't achieved GCSE.
No, financially.
The employer can choose to pay them a salary when they're in the
What is the trainee guaranteed financially?
Well, it depends on what the employer chooses to pay them.
No, that's not guaranteed, though, is it? What's the guarantee?
The guaranteed is that they're going to get work experience. Some of the young people
Come on, mate, you're not a politician. How much in pounds, shilling and pence is the trainee guaranteed to get if they take up one of these places?
Well, there is no guarantee, is there?
I don't know. I genuinely, I'm asking you. So nothing.
Well,
so you get free workforce and you get paid to take them on?
Correct.
I'm in the wrong line of work.
Well, but that's dependent if the provider wants to do that. So, for instance, for me, I wouldn't work with an employer that, for instance, wants to pay their learner nothing.
No.
I don't think it's fair. So
what's it sounds like I'm badgering the witness, but maybe I am. What's your bottom line threshold then? You'll say to a biz, sorry, I'm not going to help you unless you pay X per hour or per week.
I think they have to pay the minimum wage on their age, obviously.
Yeah.
But
it should be the policy then, shouldn't it?
It should be the policy, You're quite right. But again, like you mentioned earlier, funny enough, about apprenticeships, they're not all just about trades.
No, for sure. I mean, that's the lesson I'm in need of.
And so any new member of staff out there that companies are looking to employ, attach an apprenticeship qualification to them and you'll get the cash incentive. So if that's a manager or someone in customer service or retail, hospitality, whatever it is, and I'm really kind of focusing on those sectors because they're the ones that need the most help, get them on an apprenticeship qualification and you'll get the cash incentive. So, look, I've been through the mill over the last year. I'm not going to feel guilty about being, feeling optimistic. Don't want
you to. Crikey, no, it's clear that you are an ethical businessman and you've received much needed help to put you in a place where when this nightmare is over you've got a better than a fighting chance. In fact, you could end up in a stronger position than you were 2 years ago.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah?
And I've been in the sector coming up 20 years now. I was an apprentice myself at 19, so I've been it's all I know. I've been from apprentice to running my own business, and it has been tough over the last few years. I really have. Especially over the last year, I really have lost sleep at night, worrying about my staff, how they're going to pay their rent or their mortgage, and even my own apprentices, listening to stories over the last year of them losing their positions and working with them. Because, of course, if an apprentice loses their position, they're made redundant or whatever, then payments to us stop. But am I going to stop talking to them? Am I going to leave my apprentices?
Well, that's what I meant by ethical, unless you're yanking my chain.
I would never do that. I've got probably as many apprentices on my books now that I'm not getting paid for than what I am getting paid for. But I will never, ever
leave your
those
choice.
Apprentices out. And it is my choice.
And briefly, and I hope I'm not inviting you to step beyond your field of expertise, just tell my listeners how this helps the economy at large, how this is good for the country, as it were.
It's good for the country because, again, it's getting people back into work. It's giving people purpose. It's helping with people's mental health. It's not just about going to work. I listened to your show the other day where there was a guy talking about, being on furlough and, being jealous about people going to work. It's not just about, for young people, some of them we're working with have been out of work a year. They're really, really struggling with lots and lots of issues at home. And going to work is about building relationships, getting into a routine, earning money, for having purpose. This is getting the country back to work, giving, again, people something to focus on and having that. You can't put a price on self-worth.
No, mate, you're an evangelist. I really like your... I love the way you speak. You love your work, don't you? You're on a mission. You've actually got a vocation. It's a vocation what you've got, not just a job.
I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about people being educated, and I've always been one for vocational education. Academic qualifications are one thing, But vocational
But that's
education
that's the whole
is
I've
much-
been crawling out of this morning, isn't it? Is the idea you say vocational, and I think, carpet fitter. Nothing wrong with carpet fitters, don't get me wrong. Actually, carpet fitter is a really bad example. Carpet weaver. So, coming from Kidderminster, it's a town built upon the carpet trade. And of course, you say apprentice, I think industrial, which is both stupid and wrong, and quite possibly dangerous is a strong word, but dangerously misleading. You could just as more likely these days to be an apprentice in a digital job, or in a technological job, or in a service sector. The idea that I still, for some reason, Michael, thank you, mate. That's really great stuff. But for some reason, I hope this isn't just me. Otherwise, I'm doing that thing again where I use my radio as a kind of sounding board for my own inadequacies. But I think you do that as well. If you're of a certain age, you hear the word apprentice and you think Saturday night, Sunday morning with Albert Finney. Or you think, factory or production line, assembly, Longbridge. We need to change. That's not what the word apprentice means. Our conversation today, focusing upon yesterday's budget. After 11, I'm keen to talk about double standards, but I'm in one of those moods where I've got this idea in my head that might fall apart once I actually shine some light on it and try to share it with you. So stay tuned for that. Certainly, the prospect of me falling apart again. Again? Maybe, live on air. Until then, it's looking good. And if you don't like that, there's a great text, which I've lost now, saying, I hate the Tories, James. It's always sort of attention-grabbing first line. But, and then it goes on, I'll try and dig it out if I can during the next break. But I hate the Tories, but Rishi Sunak has helped me, both up to yesterday and including yesterday. That's his job, essentially. Although, as Emma points out, in reference to the last caller, Michael, who I felt had a very evangelical zeal to him, but it did have to concede eventually, because I wasn't sure that I'd got the right bone on that occasion, that some of these schemes don't actually require employers to pay their trainees anything at all. And as Emma points out, you can't eat self-worth. Self-worth don't pay the bills. I would say, if Rishi Sunak were listening today to the programme, he'd be very pleased with the response that we're getting. And given that this radio programme is an outpost of left-wing propaganda, brackets, copyright, Daily Mail, close brackets, that would be a doubly rewarding moment. So I haven't heard from people that had been excluded and yesterday finally received some help. So there is that huge and abiding problem, which makes very little political sense to me, but that no doubt is just because I haven't worked it out yet, or I lack the wit to see the wisdom behind it. But people who had already been looked after feel that they're still going to be in a fairly good place when they can throw their doors open again to a thronging crowd of potential customers. There's another story in the news today about how many people are itching to get out there and start spending, which I think is almost certainly true, but I don't know why. Maybe I'm doing too many caveats at the moment. But obviously, I show you one person who's coming out of the lockdown with some spending money in their pocket that they didn't have before it for whatever reason. I am not suggesting that nobody exists who's at the polar opposite extreme and is fearful for the future of their home. So you have to acknowledge that other people exist, even as you're describing one specific set or one specific category. 10:51 is the time. Tim is in Great Dunmow. Tim, what have you got?
I think what the Chancellor did yesterday was absolutely excellent for my hotel in particular and all the other hospitality businesses. It's been stop-start for 9 months, 12 months, and every time we stop, we have to throw stock away. Every time we start again, we have to then restock all the fridges, get all the food ready and the prep. So I think his grant, up to £18,000, is really good for the hospitality industry. But also I think extending the furlough, I'm not sure I agree with you. There's going to be a big bang of people coming back into pubs and hotels, so it will enable us as a hotel to gradually bring back the staff off furlough as the demand increases.
Say that last bit again.
We'll be able to gradually
no, it's
bring
not. I
back
mean,
the staff.
okay. So I think it's either. I think. Sorry, I should have the article in front of me, suggesting that there is a sum of money that is currently sort of burning a hole in our collective pockets, and we're itching to get out and start spending that. It's something I read earlier that tallies with my instincts and intuitions, but is not by any stretch of the imagination
a bridge I'm going to fight on or die on. So you're looking at the tapering of the return to normality.
They didn't come out massively to the hospitality trade when it opened up last time. The Eat Out to Help Out helped. If we hadn't had that,
the problem, the problem here is if we hadn't had that, it's hard to avoid the conclusion now that we'd probably be looking at a much smaller death toll.
Yes, I think we probably did, and I think mistakes have been made, and no doubt there'll be a big inquiry. But the reality of the situation is, I now have some money, and they do pay it extremely quickly. I have to say
that's huge, isn't it? Well, if only Universal Credit was the same, eh?
Yeah, I've had 50% of my rates paid into my bank account every single month, plus the grants last time. And if you're lucky enough, I've had my first claim form for business interruption insurance. They do not include, or my insurance company say discount the grants. The grants will not be in the calculation of what you've lost as a result of your business being interrupted.
So again, I can file you under, we've been helped so far, and yesterday meant that we'll still be fighting fit, or we'll still be up for it when our doors reopen.
Yeah, otherwise I would have made 35 people redundant.
Do you know, I said at the beginning, and I'm not, as you could probably tell, I'm not a billionaire entrepreneur by any stretch of the imagination, but I sometimes say things that I worry are too naive, but he has pressed pause. That's what we needed to do if we were going to sit it out rather than try to get rid of it. And again, it's a conversation for a different day about whether that was the right course to follow. But the furlough scheme has essentially pressed pause on businesses like yours, hasn't it? Rather than pressing stop.
It has, but what he's also done is, what people have to bear in mind is, we've been paid the 80% pay. We've then deducted the rightful NI national insurance, and the PAYE department are being exceptionally generous in saying, just wait till you reopen. Okay, the debt's building up, but they will then talk to us about a plan to put in place to pay them. So actually, not only is he giving us the wages, he's letting us use the NI and tax deducted from the staff, or keep it there for a safe fund. That's exceptionally generous.
Yes. Why exceptionally generous?
Oh, because, for instance, in Spain, they get 60% and they don't get it till about 8 months afterwards. Some people in Spain have never even had a furlough payment yet, employees. 80% is one of the highest in the world, I think.
And again, it is the difference between you having your 30 people on your payroll when we come out of this mess and you not being in business at all. I suppose, the really rabid right-wing ideology would be, well, if you go under, then tough, and then you bounce back at the end of it, and we don't spend billions of pounds keeping you on pause. We just let you wither on the vine and then grow new vines at the end. But I mean, crikey, if you're not relieved that particular brand of rabid right-wing ideology hasn't motivated the Chancellor, and I can't see that there would have been many votes in it, but it would have gone down very well on Tufton Street, who one imagines are furious about the rising corporation tax, but you're daft. I mean, maybe he couldn't do it, but he didn't do it, and for that we should all be grateful. Norwich, third caller in 2 days from Norwich, God's own city. Alan, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello. Aha.
Thank you. First-time caller.
Welcome.
I manufacture a quality product in the UK. I produce water pumps in Buxton, Derbyshire. Now, Rishi Sunak announced a policy of free ports. The introduction of free ports subsidises foreign imports in direct competition with myself and other manufacturers. It may create thousands of jobs in or near a free port, but it loses tens of thousands of jobs in the wider world of UK manufacturing.
Why then would he do it? Do you see what I mean? Yeah, you're clearly more across. There's disputes at the highest level about how good or bad free ports are. But if your analysis is correct, why would a British Chancellor do it?
I don't really understand this. I don't think this lot understands business. I mean, I export myself over the world, so I know the problems of exporting. But I don't think the government do. I think it's all headline news. A few local jobs at a Freeport is actually the Trojan horse to get foreign importers a cheap way of manufacturing.
But I understood it to be more of a tariff postponement than a tariff cancellation. So in layman's terms, what will... I mean, I suppose the obvious question I'd ask is, why can't you take advantage of free ports? And the answer is because you manufacture here. So what will change?
Correct.
If I manufacture in Timbuktu, then what changes with the introduction of a free port?
Okay. Let me put this in the context. I did a business trip to Australia and New Zealand to sell my pumps. I sell a little micro pump. And there's huge demand over in those countries, in particular New Zealand. However, logistically, it's very difficult because it costs me £35 to send a pump to New Zealand. So therefore, I've got a financial disadvantage of 35 quid. Now, when you're starting to sell a product, you sell in small quantities. You obviously don't sell 1,000.
Yeah.
So
right.
in order to get into the market, I have to bear the cost of 35 quid postage on top of the cost of my pump. Now, if they had free ports over there, I could actually put a pallet load into a free port and then sell them locally, defer all the tariffs, defer the local VAT and sales taxes, and it's a huge advantage. So having a free port, I would love that if I could have got into the Australian and New Zealand markets. I've actually given up.
Okay.
I
understand things a lot better than I did at the beginning of your call, for which I can only really be grateful. But obviously that doesn't butter any of your particular parsnips, does it?
No, what it does.
So I'm going to run out of time. I'm going to run out of time. I understand that. Because the B word wasn't mentioned in the budget yesterday, but actually this is Brexit, right? This is what people like Patrick Minford were perhaps predicting when they said that leaving would decimate manufacturing and agriculture in this country, because this Singapore-on-Thames dream, great news for massive foreign manufacturers, curtains for smallish domestic manufacturers, if I've understood you correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and free ports, they're not to the advantage of UK manufacturers at all.
And they are to the advantage of global investors and massive multinationals.
And even some little rip-off shop in Shanghai who wants to sell a rubbish product, they can now send a pallet in.
Okay. Well, again, I'm not as across this as you are, but that is a fairly fat fly that's landed in the ointment of Rishi Sunak's budget. I think we'll move on. And what I'm most interested in is a great piece in the Times today by David Aranovich, which tallies with something that I'm increasingly... I think I probably undersold it slightly when I called it footballification. I was very proud of that. Still am. But it probably doesn't quite go far enough. David Aranovich points out in the Times today that the... Prime Minister's double standards extend to support for the IRA. You may have followed the story of Roy Greenslade, a former Daily Mirror editor who has written an article in the British Journalism Review, which is, I think, best described as an unrepentant admission of supporting the IRA. And, of course, I mean, everybody knows that essentially involves supporting terrorism, in a sense, in the purest sense. And as Aranovich points out in the Times, Boris Johnson has issued an outright condemnation of this, while elevating into the House of Lords someone called Claire Fox, who has never denied her youthful support for IRA terrorism. And I wish it wasn't so flippin' obvious. But guess which one was a Brexiter? So even on something that was, you'd think as... what's the word I'm looking for? Conclusive, categorical? I don't know. Something that was as huge as supporting the IRA. You'll remember how that perception stroke allegation followed Jeremy Corbyn around throughout his leadership of the Labour Party, and I mean, it might be again naive of me, but I thought there were some principles that were deal breakers. You know, some principles on which everybody agreed. So if you're not familiar with my theory of footballification, it's best understood as judging something entirely by the perceived loyalties of the protagonist rather than judging an action by the action. So if Keith does something, you're perfectly cool with it. If I do it, you think I should be hanged, drawn and quartered. Or, depending on what colour scarf you're wearing, if I do something, then you will cheer me to the rafters or simply look the other way. If Keith does exactly the same thing, then you will put him in the stocks and hurl rotten tomatoes at him until he drowns in tomato juice. So that's a chilling example, and I can't make head nor tail of it. I think, you know, I don't know Roy Greenslade. I think our paths have crossed a couple of times, but if he... as a supporter of the IRA, I think he's absolutely gross. I mean, beyond belief. And I would once have said the idea that you can secretly nurse these views while rising to the very top of the journalistic profession is something I can't quite get my head around. But, of course, today I have to say, well, if you can get put in the House of Lords for holding, arguably, Aranovich makes the case in the Times today, stronger support for the IRA, specifically with reference to the attack on Warrington in 1993, which led the father of one of the victims of that bombing, Colin Parry, to really, I think heartbreak or rage, call it what you will, absolute disbelief that this Claire Fox woman could have been put in the House of Lords. That's the best example I can think of what I've been sort of obsessing about for the last few years. And I think I can see it everywhere today. I'm like that kid in The Sixth Sense. Because you remember when the Home Secretary, an independent inquiry into allegations of bullying regarding Priti Patel, came back positive. The Prime Minister's own advisor on the ministerial code concluded that Priti Patel had broken it as Home Secretary, and Boris Johnson decided to ignore the findings, or at least to not believe them. It's in the Prime Minister's prerogative. So he commissions an independent report, or an independent report is commissioned. He has an independent advisor on the ministerial code. That advisor, that inquiry, concludes that she bullied people and therefore broke the ministerial code. And Boris Johnson chooses to believe otherwise, which is his prerogative. But Meghan Markle today is accused of bullying staff at the palace. They're 2 or 3 years old, these allegations, and the people that were allegedly bullied are not responsible for the allegations being put into the public place today. They've been put into the public place by a bloke who did PR for the RBS, the Royal Bank of Scotland, in the middle of the financial crisis. That counts as a qualification, apparently, in the world of public relations. So that is a fairly huge double standard, right? And then up in Scotland, the allegation against Nicola Sturgeon is that she's broken the ministerial code, and Conservative politicians in England and their countless client journalists are on the march, calling for Nicola Sturgeon's blood because they accuse her of doing something that Priti Patel was found by an independent inquiry of having done. Now, if there is an independent inquiry into Nicola Sturgeon's conduct and it finds that she's broken the ministerial code, personally, I think she should resign. I don't want to now get bombarded on social media by people passionately involved in the Scottish independence debate. I think the only way I can say that Priti Patel should have been fired on the spot is by obviously contending that if Nicola Sturgeon is found by independent officers to have breached the ministerial code, then her position should become untenable. Now, I don't know when this became controversial or whether it's actually always been like this. I don't think it has. I genuinely don't think that it has always been the case that as a country or as a profession or the political and media establishment, whatever it may be, I just don't think it was always like this. I'm pretty sure that it used to be, and I don't know what changed. But I'm pretty sure we used to be capable of, judging an action regardless of who. So that's just wrong. I don't care who did it. It's wrong. Right? And you've got an example with Meghan Markle and Priti Patel. You've got an example with Nicola Sturgeon and Priti Patel. You've got an example with Roy Greenslade and Claire Fox. And there are millions of examples everywhere you look at the moment. So what am I asking you? Well, I'd love you to tell me what changed and when, but I don't know if that's doable. Do you know my moment of revelation on this? And it's quite an odd one, but and actually it's something I never would have understood if it wasn't for Twitter. Because I was and remain, I mean, you don't have to point it out now because he's proved it beyond all reasonable doubt, but I was quite an early warner of Donald Trump's depravity. Not just, of course, the descent into fascistic behaviours and tendencies, culminating in people wearing Auschwitz T-shirts storming the Capitol on his behalf and, of course, at his behest. So early doors, it was obvious whether he was mocking a disabled journalist, whether it was the way he spoke about women, or whether it was the number of allegations of appalling sexual conduct that were levelled at him, that those would be the allegations of illegality. We know that he paid off a porn star shortly after his youngest son was born, and none of this touched the sides with his supporters. It was bizarre. But right at the very beginning, the widower of Joe Cox, who was assassinated by a white supremacist terrorist, was reported to have behaved inappropriately with female colleagues in his job. And that was awful, full stop. The day it was reported, and I'd forgotten about this until I was writing something the other day. The day it was reported, it was one of my earliest, I wasn't that big on Twitter back then, but it was the first time I think that I either got targeted by an algorithm or someone stuck a target on my head. And that because I'd been so outspoken in my condemnation of Donald Trump's depravity, people genuinely believed, I say people, numerous Twitter accounts, who knows whether they're real people or not, numerous Twitter accounts genuinely believed that I had some sort of embarrassment attached to the fact that the widower of a woman murdered by a white supremacist was being accused of bad behaviour at work towards female colleagues. And I still don't understand that. So that means in the minds of, and let's presume they're people, because otherwise we'll be here all day. In the minds of these people, because they had presumably closed their eyes to or waved through all of the evidence of Donald Trump's abject depravity, particularly with regard to women, you know, boasting about sexually assaulting them. This is the bit I don't get. I genuinely don't get. So their man, if you like, was boasting about being a sex offender on tape, and they were still cheering for him. So therefore, when somebody whose wife had been assassinated by a racist was accused of sexual misdemeanors, he would be my man because I'm passionately anti-racist, and therefore I would no doubt be just as hypocritical and despicable as them and somehow seek to excuse his behaviour. I have, even to this day, not come up with a better explanation for this. I genuinely don't. So you sit there defending despicable behaviour because you're a racist and Donald Trump speaks to you, and therefore you think when someone whose wife has been killed by a racist is accused of misconduct, sexual misconduct, you think that that would make me a hypocrite because I would now turn around and defend him. And I know it sounds like an odd example, but for me it's the real sort of lens through which I look at all double standards, because it's as if the French have a great phrase for it, about one weight, two measures. So it weighs the same until you put it on a different scale that's calibrated differently. So I look at Dominic Cummings and his behaviour being defended by politicians who, when Nicola Sturgeon was photographed standing up when she should have been sitting down at a wake following the funeral of a friend, they went after Nicola Sturgeon with all their fangs bared, and yet they would stand up in public and say that Dominic Cummings did what any father would do. So I'm genuinely intrigued by this, genuinely intrigued. And I don't think anyone can deny it. I mean, again, for the record, I'm guilty of it myself. You don't want the people that you like or the people that you sit alongside to let you down. But when they do let you down, you should be even angrier. than you would be when people who you thought were wrong-uns from the start have behaved in a way that proves they were wrong-uns from the start. That's the bit I don't get. And maybe I've done you a grave disservice. Maybe your comfort with all of the allegations and evidence surrounding Donald Trump's sexual depravity had absolutely nothing to do with his racism or indeed yours. Maybe there's another brilliant explanation as to why Meghan Markle being accused of bullying is the end of the world as we know it in the right-wing media, and Priti Patel being found guilty of bullying is in the right-wing media something that we should all just, nothing to see here, everybody move on. It's nuts, right? And I don't know what I genuinely don't know what the dividing line is. David Aranovic's piece in The Times focuses on Brexit inevitably because a Brexiter gets put in the House of Lords despite supporting the IRA, and a journalist who used to edit the Mirror gets put on the naughty step for revealing that he used to support the IRA. I mean, identical conduct? I don't know. It's pretty identical from the outside. One gets put in the House of Lords, one gets pilloried by the same people. Surely you have to pillory them both or put them both in the House of Lords. It just baffles me. And whether or not we'll get a phone in out of this, God only knows. But my question to you, as someone who is wiser and older than me, or someone who is less wise and less old than me, is, am I right in thinking this is new? It didn't used to be like this when I started doing this job. You know, Tony Blair versus John Major didn't feel like this. Gordon Brown versus David Cameron. I don't know. Did it begin when they lied about the global financial crisis in 2008? I just wonder whether once you get a big enough lie out there, it poisons everything. And very successfully in political terms, the Conservative Party under David Cameron managed to blame Gordon Brown for a global financial crisis that him and Alistair Darling were actually coping with quite well when they got slung out of Downing Street in 2010. I genuinely don't know. So the double standards we're talking about, let's go for Priti Patel, we'll go for Dominic Cummings, we'll go for Claire Fox, we'll go for Nicola Sturgeon, we'll go for Meghan Markle. Whichever example you like, just tell me why you think it's so rabid now and so widespread, and where does it come from? When did it start? There's nothing more satisfying in the media than reading something or listening to something that just makes things slot into place for you. And David Aranovich has achieved that, for me at least today. Let me read you the relevant paragraphs, because the notion of double standards, as you know, has been preying on my mind for ages, and I'm keen to understand it, but I just don't. And it feels and looks to me as if things are considerably worse than they ever have been. 10 years ago, if I'd been sitting here telling you some of the stuff that I now tell you every day, I would have thought that I was living in a very, very different country from the one that the only one I've ever known and lived in. So listen to this. Such is the character... So Boris Johnson spokesman says he outright condemns the former Mirror editor Roy Greenslade, who has written an unrepentant admission of his support for the IRA. And that's where we take up the story. David Aranovich, in today's Time, follows on the detail that the Prime Minister's spokesman quoted him as saying that he outright condemns the former editor. No qualification. Prompt condemnation. Okay? Headlines followed. And yet, writes David Aranovich, such is the character of the Prime Minister that I couldn't help wondering whether, had Greenslade become an enthusiastic Brexiteer late in his career, he might have avoided the condemnation and won instead a seat in the House of Lords. Because that's exactly what happened last summer when Claire Fox, formerly of the Irish Freedom Movement, became Baroness Fox. When in 2019, Fox stood for Nigel Farage's Brexit party in the North West Euro constituency that includes Warrington, I pointed out that she and her Trotskyist sect had supported violent republicanism, including IRA bombings in Britain, and that she had never recanted. Indeed, she was several shades more extreme than Greenslade because she regarded the IRA ceasefire and the Good Friday Agreement as betrayals. Her refusal to recant led to her being condemned during the election by the peace campaigner Colin Parry, father of one of the two boys killed in Warrington by an IRA bomb in 1993. Now, you've heard me wang on about footballification. Probably too much, to be honest, because it's a blunt instrument to describe something that's actually quite complicated. Tribalism is not the same thing, but it's relevant. Get angry with friends and allies, writes Matt in Cambridge, who do wrong. That's not how tribes work, James. It's a great point, but this is much deeper. This seems to me to extend much further into public life than anything we've encountered before. Why is it happening? It's not all about Brexit, is it?
No, can't be. 0345 6060973. And give me the when of it. Why is it happening, and when did it start to go so nuts? Is my mentioning of Twitter relevant to this? Is it that idea that people, if they are people, I can't keep saying that, who, you know, I usually typify them as tapping away on a Tesco laptop in their mum's back bedroom, which just conjures up an image wearing a dirty bathrobe. So suddenly they actually belong to a group. Suddenly they feel part of a community, because there's loads of other people in Tesco with Tesco laptops in dirty bathrobes sitting in the spare room tapping away on a laptop. Suddenly they feel like an army, and it doesn't matter what the target is as long as there's an army. I do not know. So in order to lift the lid on this question, in order to find our way into it, try and answer this for me, all right? Why are people who have a problem with Meghan Markle also likely to have been in favour of Brexit and opposed to lockdowns? Can you answer that? If I'm describing you, then I'll do my best to be friendly if you do. 0345 6060973. I may not have picked the best examples. We'll be returning to this topic a lot in the future from all various angles. But I fully appreciate there's plenty of people out there who hate Meghan Markle but who also hate Brexit, and plenty of people out there who think lockdowns were by far the best policy to pursue, but also think Brexit was a good idea. But I'm talking broadly, and I'm possibly talking as much about the media as I am about the average punter. Why do these three positions seem to coexist so widely? Okay, I don't like Brexit. I don't like Meghan Markle. I do want to leave the European Union, and I think lockdowns were a bad idea. If you hit the numbers now on that question, you will get through. I'd really want to hear what your answer to that. Why do those three positions coexist? I can kind of see some answers to why Brexit and Meghan Markle might push similar buttons in people, but then the lockdown scepticism came out and I got really confused. Why did that seem to coexist so frequently with dislike of the Duchess of Sussex and enthusiasm for the idea of leaving the European Union? Often, you know, without much evidence on either side of these arguments, but we all seem to have strong, pungent opinions. 0345 6060973. Anthony's in Luton. Anthony, what's going on? Fix it for me, Anthony.
Yeah, I think it's a blatant case of nationalistic racism, because I
not on the. Oh well, you were on hold before I went for the lockdown angle, because there's nothing racist about lockdowns, I don't think. But go on, talk to me about the double standards.
I'm talking about the way the right-wing press and a lot of other people seem to have a go at someone like Meghan Markle, because she's done them no harm at all. I mean, I'm old enough to have seen this sort of thing happen before, and it's happening again. And they just seem to pillory someone because she's different. I've seen them making comparisons on Channel 4 the other day between the other brother's wife and Meghan Markle. And, you know, for no reason at all, she seems to be getting clobbered by...
Well, there must be a reason. It might be a bogus reason, or a reason that you and I don't recognise, but there must be a reason. And Diana, Princess of Wales, had a terrible time at the hands of the press, particularly after the divorce, and that can't have been anything to do with her ethnicity or skin colour, can it?
Well, I think that... I don't know if you ever saw this last night. I saw it on the internet. I saw this on the internet about someone who was saying that there are certain people who say that they want royals to be white. They want them to be...
but again, that doesn't address the Diana angle. So I believe an awful lot of the abuse of Meghan Markle, for the record, is motivated by racism, both consciously and unconsciously. That's a given for me. But your point doesn't quite work, and nor perhaps to some of mine, because of the treatment that Diana, Princess of Wales, received from the same sort of places, from these men in suits in the palace and from the power brokers of Fleet Street, you know. So it's not that double standard doesn't necessarily exist. So bullying, let's do it with Priti Patel instead, because then again, any allegations of ethnicity playing a part here look weaker. Priti Patel found to have bullied staff, right-wing press,
your phrase and mine. Nothing to see here. Everybody move on. You know, a little bit of bullying, a little bit of shouting. So that's how you get things done. Meghan Markle accused of bullying staff with a lot less evidence at the moment and no independent inquiry that concludes the allegations are true. It's the end of the world as we know it. So what's going on there? That's got nothing to do with ethnicity, or I don't see.
I find it really hard to understand that because
you and me both.
No, really, because they've left the country for that particular reason.
I know.
They said it quite clearly, and even when they're out of reach of the press and whoever these people are, they're still trying to club with them, you know.
No, they are, and they're not. I mean, again, out of reach, you know, they are keen to pursue public life. They're given an interview to Oprah Winfrey because they want to remain as public figures. They just want to have a little bit more control, or a lot more control, over their media coverage, over their lives. But again, dishonest people will tell you that they left because they want to be private. They want to protect their privacy. They want to step out of public life. I don't see that. But there you go. If you have got a problem with Meghan Markle and you're chewing on these allegations of bullying, but you were pretty relaxed after Sir Alexander Allen resigned as the Prime Minister's independent advisor on the Ministerial Code after the Prime Minister ignored his advice that the Ministerial Code had been broken by the Home Secretary, how can you be angrier or more involved in the smaller allegation? 0345 60 973. Listen, this is one of my convoluted days. I did warn you that I had some possibly big thoughts of that, but very kindly you're queuing up to join in. But we will return to this on another day. I will finesse my analysis. But there is the question for now. How can you be cross about that, but completely cool with that, when the behaviour or the allegation is more or less identical? A very strange phone-in. Thank you for indulging me. But talking of double standards, reading a brilliant piece in the Times about one IRA supporter being outright condemned by Boris Johnson and another IRA supporter being put in the House of Lords by Boris Johnson as a kind of apotheosis of double standards. Priti Patel, possibly a more accessible example, found by the Prime Minister's independent advisor on the Ministerial Code to have broken the Ministerial Code, but of course no sanction at all, still in the job. And yet the same people that told us to move along, there's nothing to see here with regard to the Home Secretary, are absolutely adamant that if Nicola Sturgeon is found to have broken the Ministerial Code, then she should be stoned in the marketplace. And then you look at Meghan Markle, accused of bullying, which is, of course, precisely the offence that Priti Patel was found to have committed when she was found to have broken the Ministerial Code by the Prime Minister's own advisor, independent advisor on the Ministerial Code. So what the hell is going on? How new is it? And what caused it? And, of course, it could be that I've just started paying attention and you think it's always been like this and you can provide some evidence to back up that contention. Ian is in Leeds. Ian, what's going on?
Good afternoon. Good morning,
hello,
James.
hello.
My thoughts are, so, I mean, use an example of, to kind of drop back into the media, is that the first two examples, so taking two out of the three, so Meghan Markle and Brexit. So if you look
you don't make me be pedantic to start, because I can see a lot of links between Meghan Markle.
No, I know, but there's a line between all three, so just bear with me. If you take an example of somebody like Lawrence Fox, who is fairly outspoken on both of those two cases, both of those two subject matters.
I'm going to have to trust you on this. He has a strong view of Meghan Markle, does he?
Yes, you can maybe guess what it is. Yes, he absolutely does.
Well, hang on. Would you mind if we didn't use specific examples that I'm not familiar with? So if you use someone I'm familiar with, didn't Farage came out anti-lockdown, didn't he, after being massively in favour of them at the beginning? That would be characteristically Nigelic. Let's use him then, because I'm a little bit more familiar with his oeuvre. Okay, excellent. So let's use him, and we can use him in both the Brexit debate. So there's lots of people that he's obviously struck a chord with over the past few years with Brexit, and as such, they now trust what he says. Yeah. Now, I think up until about 12 months ago, including you and I, nobody was really none the wiser on how viruses could spread and the effect of masks and things like that. But the difference between probably you and I and the people that are anti-lockdown and anti-masks is we would tend to believe those with the accreditations, whether that be doctors, scientists, and so forth. Now, and then when they're wrong, that's when the really weird stuff happens. Because I know I'm being very self-referential this hour, but when I tweeted something last March where various accredited experts, as you might call them, had said that Brexit would make the arrival of the vaccine here slower, tweeted it without comment. And, of course, the fact that those particular experts have been proved wrong is the reason why got picked up 9 months later in a national newspaper and still pops up on my Twitter feed every other week with someone saying, shows what you know. That. So it is something to do with experts, but it's subtler than you allow, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But I think the concept of it is that what Nigel Farage has done with he's got an army of folk that now believe everything that he says.
Even as the evidence that he was categorically wrong about Brexit is mounting up in front of them. This is the bit where I lose focus. I mean, look at Fish, look at Ireland. I mean, all the things that we said are now coming true, and yet you think they still trust him.
But James, what you're doing is you're getting too much into the detail, which he doesn't.
Facts, yes.
Right? So if you stay at a very high level, right, which he does, and which he, and I must say I'm not a fan of him, but he does do it well as he whips up his support, is that no matter what he comes out tomorrow with, and it could be anything, it could be that the water's not wet, he'll have an army of people that believe him. So it just so happens that.
But what do the themes have in common, though? No, it can't just be the salesman. The products must have something in common, because if Farage came out tomorrow and said immigration is great, I don't think that his most loyal supporters would suddenly change their views, would they? So the product must have something.
He waters a seed that's already there. So
and what is the seed with regard to lockdown? Because I can see what it is that the Duchess of Sussex and Brexit might have in common in the context of this country. Where does lockdown fit into that garden centre?
It's the concept of, I mean, I think it all tails back to the concept of freedom and having the ability to make your own choices. And you can draw similarities between that and Brexit.
Yeah, you can with Brexit you can, but then the Duchess of Sussex. I mean, I might be on a hiding to nothing with this. It might be a tricycle of my own invention that is completely unfit for purpose. But yeah, you've nudged me closer to the light, I think. Mark possibly nudges us even further. He writes, the thing that links the three is entitlement, James. Brexit, we don't want the EU telling us what to do. Lockdown, we don't want the government telling us what to do, dictating our freedoms. Duchess of Sussex, we don't want a foreigner disrupting an English institution. It falls down slightly on the Meghan Markle one, that. It's odd, isn't it? Is it the three legs of the stool or the three wheels of the tricycle in almost every analysis don't seem to be the same size. Slim's in Hackney. Slim, what have you got?
James, how you doing? First time caller.
Welcome.
So I think you've opened up so many different angles.
Yeah, I'm sorry. A producer's cross with me. I should have been a little bit more focused.
I like the way your brain just dances around anyway, so this is good.
Thanks.
But I mean, I think the one thing that you tapped into is the nimbleness that the right have to divide and rule, and they do it so much better than progressives and the left. They can just shift their axis and their focus. And they're doing it so well on so many issues now, whether it's big tech, whether it's big establishment, Hollywood, Islington elites, draining the swamp, Brussels. So they know what line to take about everything. Because
how do they know? What is the commonality here? What is it? And you don't have to use the three examples that I'm playing with today, but it'd be great if you could.
The three were what? They were Meghan, what was it?
Brexit, Meghan, lockdown.
Well, Brexit's Brussels bureaucrats, isn't it? So that's easy enough.
But then we've got this Frost dude now who's been made king of Brexit, and he's an unelected bureaucrat with a seat in the House of Lords.
I mean, there's obviously huge contradictions there, but they're just a lot better at playing the game.
Right.
They're a lot better at calling out these stupid culture war buttons, which they can then, and because of the internet, because of algorithms, and because we're all stuck at home on our laptops, they can rally their tribe to that line or that particular argument with so much more speed than we used to be able to do. And that's obviously why everybody now slots into their corners, because there's no way you can balance yourself on the middle. I mean, I'm a lefty, I'm a progressive, but I have like right-wing things that I'm interested in. I like conservative thinkers. I quite like Jordan Peterson. If I put a Jordan Peterson thing on my Facebook, I guarantee a good half of my friends will be like, what the...
Yes, again, there's a bit of a gap in my knowledge, as with the last caller, but I'm broadly sort of aware of his thesis. So this is a sort of...
Well, you can replace that with anything.
Yes.
I mean, you could say, I quite like the way Ken Clark speaks about this, and people go, what are you talking about? He's Tory, he brought in
So this is a bit like the game I used to play, and it upset almost everybody, which in retrospect is probably not a great achievement. But I used to play Far Right or Corbynite when I got a particularly nasty tweet, and I'd remove it from all context, and it was very hard to tell the difference between someone who saw themselves as far left and someone who saw themselves as far right. Their tactics were almost identical, and so was their language, actually.
Well, I think where we move from here is you have to get a space where you can actually be able to stand out from your tribe. And it's hard to do, and you generate.
But what I know what I mean, I don't believe in culture wars, and it may well be something I change my view on as time progresses. Partly because the loudest exponents of culture wars that I've come across personally don't really have much evidence. I asked one of them what his thing was, what he was crossest about. If you remove the trans debate from the conversation, and he started talking about eggs. On emojis, which struck me as odd.
I think that the culture wars often are a proxy, aren't they?
But there's only one side. I know who's on one side of the culture war. It is, broadly speaking, people that don't like Meghan Markle, do like Brexit, didn't like lockdowns, and like Donald Trump. But on the other side of that, I mean, I don't know anything about Meghan Markle. I kind of find myself drawn to defending her because so many powerful people are bullying her, but she may well turn out to be undeserving of defence and support. Brexit is evidentially silly. It's a daft thing to do. And Donald Trump he boasts himself about the things that repel me. So who's on the other side? You want to read Jordan Peterson? I say, great idea. Fill your boots. So who's on the other side of the culture war?
Well, the culture wars is a huge fight, isn't it? But it's often a proxy war.
Yes.
The people that are being debated are in the middle, and like the trans debate, you'll often have straight people on both sides having a huge barney about someone else's turf, a bit like us going to war in Afghanistan, and the argument that the fight is between it's America and.
So I can't criticise you for overreaching on this because, as you said at the outset, we've probably bitten off more than anyone can reasonably chew with only one mouth. But
I think it all goes back originally to the invention of the internet, because before that we were able to have nuance and we could go to libraries and look things up, and we didn't fall into tribes because we communicated and connected in so many different ways. And now it's so easy to connect with anybody we want and find out whatever information we want. So we naturally, the classic is the conspiracy theorist.
And you can all find company. Yeah, you can all I do my own research on the internet. So finally, if there were two flags here, what are those flags? I mean, if we were to make the broadest of distinctions and definitions of the two, quote, sides, leaving for the moment the question of how many people are in the middle, what do they divide across most, obviously?
It's impossible to pin it down, isn't it?
I think it is, although I lean towards white supremacism in a way, because, or at least towards supremacism, full stop, actually. The old order, the man being the boss, the white man being the boss, the straight white man being the boss. If you tie all of that together, and white supremacism is a really unhelpful phrase, actually, but those three things being in retreat at the moment. So if you're a woman of colour, you're going to get even more abuse than you are if you're just a woman. That explains the differences between Meghan Markle and Diana, Princess of Wales. But then Priti Patel comes along, who throws a stick in the spokes of my reasoning. Slim, we'll talk again, I hope.
Eyes down, round and round, let's all sip much money.